we're going to be modeling with polygons. What is a polygon? Polygon means many angles. Basically, a polygon is a two-dimensional shape, like this little rectangle, that exists on the surface of a piece of 3D geometry in three-dimensional space. So it can be any number of sides. Well, starting with about 3, because you need 3 sides to make an actual polygon. That's the minimum. But, a polygon can be 4, 5, 6, however many sides it needs to be. So we don't always have to model with polygons in Maya. There's other ways of modeling. We have what's called curves. And these are like, if you've used Adobe Illustrator, they're sort of like Bezier curves that exist in the 3D space. And with those curves can be made surfaces. So this is another way of modeling geometry. So you imagine the shapes in Adobe Illustrator. Curves and surfaces kind of behave like that, only in 3D space. Polygons are a little bit different in that if I have one edge here, it doesn't really have much of a relationship to the edges beyond itself. So if I move that around, it doesn't affect the whole curve. It just affects that edge and the ones that are touching it. Whereas with a curve, I can grab a control point and move it, and it'll behave like Bezier curve in that it will kind of bend the whole curve. So we'll probably talk about curves and surfaces later, but for now I want to focus on polygons because that's kind of the basic way of creating 3D geometry. So what we're looking at is this default sphere. That's what we call a primitive shape. So primitive objects are sort of your basic three-dimensional forms in Maya. We can make a cube, we can make a cylinder, right? We can make all these basic primitive forms. And these are sort of the building blocks of the things that we're going to be able to build. So I'm just creating some of these and moving them around, right? So we have a variety of different primitive objects. You can see that I can select those objects severally, one at a time. If I hold down Shift to select, I can select multiple objects, okay? And if I continue to hold Shift and click on the ones that are selected, I can deselect them, okay? So Shift allows you to add or subtract from a group of selections. If I select more than one object, I can group those objects together into a single group. That's found under Edit, Hierarchy, Group. Or you can use Command G on the Macintosh, and that will create a group. So now I can move these things together as a single object. They're not a single object, they're just a group. So they're sort of loosely associated. I can still select them individually, but if I select one of them and push the up arrow key, it's going to go up that hierarchy. If you look in the outliner, you'll see these are now grouped. It gave it a name, group 1, and it put all these objects underneath that group. So they're all part of that group. I can pick any one of those either from the outliner or in the 3D scene. And if I push the up arrow key, it's going up to this group level, and that allows me to manipulate the whole group. So that's grouping. So if I decide later I don't want those objects to be grouped, I can select the group, right, either in the outliner or in the scene by clicking one object and the up arrow key like this. And I go to Edit, Ungroup. I can select different objects and group those, Command G, and now I have a different group. Groups can be part of other groups, so you can have a whole string or hierarchy of groups, right? If I have this group of objects, and then I select both of those groups and group that, now they're both subgroups of a larger group. So one of the things that's good about the outliner is you can see what things are called, and it's good to name things and keep this pretty well organized. I'll show you the objects I built, but I gave them specific names. Maya doesn't like to have spaces in those names, so you want to use underscore or just letters and numbers. Then it won't use any special characters. It won't accept those. And if you're going to have more than one of something, I would recommend giving it a 0, 1. So when you duplicate that, Maya will automatically create the new one and call it 0, 2. It'll give it the same name, but it'll figure out what the number should be. So that's helpful. There's also a function called parenting. And parenting is like grouping, but it's kind of creating a dependency of one on the other or one toward the other. So if I select this cylinder first and then Shift select the cone, and then I go to Edit Parent, now the cone is the parent of the cylinder. Do you see that? I started with the cylinder, clicking that first, and then Shift selected the cone, and then I went to Parent. The hotkey for that is P. So if I want to do that again, I can make the donut the parent of the sphere. But to do that, I select the sphere first, and then shift select the donut or the torus and hit the letter P. Now there's another parenting relationship there. So when I select the torus, it's going to take with it the sphere. Do you see that? It's not grouped, but that sphere is now dependent on the torus. And the same thing here, when I select the parent in this other relationship, that's the cone. And so the cylinder goes with the cone. If I just select the child in that relationship, then I can move that independently. But whenever I select the parent, it's going to take the child with it. So again, the child in this group, or in this relationship, is the sphere, but the torus is the parent. And if I do that accidentally, or if I change my mind, I can always go to Edit Unparent, which is Shift P. But I want to be selecting the child here. Select the child and do Shift P, and that unparents from that object. So now I don't have any more parenting relationships in the scene.